They poured red wine down her dress in front of 300 elite guests. Laughter echoed through the ballroom as phones shot up to record the humiliation, with voices in the crowd calling her a confused waitress who didn't belong in their world. But nobody in that glittering room knew one crucial fact. The quiet woman standing before them was the sole owner of the holding company, about to sign a $1 billion deal with their firm. The wine hit her chest, warm and acidic, soaking instantly into the understated fabric of her simple black dress. Gasps cracked through the grand hall like fractured glass. Then came the laughter, low, cruel, and contagious. Lenses zoomed in, capturing her public degradation in high definition. Audrey Vance did not flinch. She was 38, with fair skin, sharp features, and pale, steady eyes that held absolutely no panic. She wore no diamonds, no designer labels screaming for attention, and her blonde hair was pulled back into a simple, unpretentious knot. To the ultra-rich crowd dripping in sequins and arrogance, she was a ghost, a nobody. Sterling Hayes, the CEO of Ethirus Holdings, stood inches away, holding the empty wine glass. His wife, Camilla, leaned against his arm, a diamond-crusted smirk playing on her lips. "Maybe now she remembers where the staff entrance is," Camilla murmured, her voice carrying just enough for the front row of VIPs to hear. A few executives chuckled. A camera flash blinded the room for a split second. Audrey looked down at the dark crimson stain spreading across her collar. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice to demand an explanation or scream her identity. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a plain white handkerchief, and dabbed a single drop of wine from her jawline. Her movements were slow, precise, and entirely unbothered. She lifted her gaze, meeting Sterling's eyes. For a fraction of a second, the smugness on his face faltered. There is something terrifying about a person who doesn't break when you try to smash them. Without a single word, Audrey turned on her heel. The crowd parted instinctively, their whispers trailing her like smoke. She walked toward the grand oak doors, leaving them with their hollow victory. But by the time she crossed the threshold, their billion-dollar empire was already turning to ash. 30 minutes earlier, the evening had been flawless. The Ethirus Gala was the corporate social event of the decade. 300 guest investors, media tycoons, and board members packed the 5-star Grand Solstice Hotel. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over white silk tablecloths. A string quartet played in the corner, entirely drowned out by the clinking of champagne flutes and the hum of rehearsed laughter. Every screen in the hall displayed a spinning silver logo, Ethirus Holdings, a new era. The $1 billion merger was the only thing on anyone's lips. It was a lifeline. Ethirus had been quietly bleeding capital for months, and this mystery investor was their ultimate salvation. Audrey had arrived quietly. Security had stopped her at the golden ropes. The guard, a towering man with a tight earpiece, looked her up and down, taking in her plain wool coat and lack of a glittering invitation. "Catering and support staff use the loading dock in the back, ma'am," he warned, stepping firmly into her path. Audrey merely pulled out a solid black titanium card stamped with a single geometric crest. The guard's eyes widened. He swallowed hard, his face flushing red, and quickly unhooked the velvet rope. Inside, she moved like a shadow. She liked it this way. The wealthy always telegraphed their insecurities through loud jewelry and louder voices. Audrey preferred to observe. She took a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and stood near a massive marble pillar. 2 women in emerald silk brushed past her, clutching their designer purses a little tighter. "Did someone leave a coat check girl out here?" one whispered loudly. Audrey ignored it. She watched Sterling Hayes work the room, his smile perfectly calibrated, shaking hands and making promises he couldn't keep. Beside him, Camilla practically floated, soaking in the admiration of the crowd. They looked invincible. They looked exactly like the kind of people Audrey had spent her entire life outsmarting. She took a slow sip of her water, waiting for the right moment to step into the light. The host tapped the microphone, sending a sharp hum through the ballroom. The quartet stopped abruptly. Cameras swung toward the main stage, where a velvet backdrop framed the Ethirus executives. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, his voice echoing off the marble floors, "welcome to a historic night. Tonight, we do not just celebrate a partnership, we celebrate a billion-dollar vision that will reshape the global market." Applause erupted, loud and greedy. You could practically smell the desperation beneath the expensive cologne. Camilla Hayes stepped up to the microphone, her gold-sequined gown catching every spotlight. She waved gracefully, playing the perfect queen of corporate royalty. Sterling took his place beside her, fixing his cuffs, looking out at the crowd with heavy-lidded arrogance. "We are waiting on our principal partner to arrive," Sterling added, flashing a charming practice grin. "But let me assure you, the ink is practically dry. Aetheris is moving into the stratosphere." From her spot by the pillar, Audrey checked her simple leather watch. It was time. She stepped away from the marble column and began walking down the outer aisle. She didn't rush. Her steps were measured, calm, and entirely out of sync with the frantic energy of the room. A waiter nearly collided with her, barely balancing his tray. "Watch it," he hissed, assuming she was a lost subordinate. Audrey simply sidestepped him, her eyes fixed on the stage. She wasn't hiding anymore, but she also wasn't announcing herself. She wanted to see how Sterling and Camilla operated when they thought nobody important was watching. As she closed the distance to the VIP section, the whispers began. Guests turned, frowning at the stark contrast of her plain black dress against the sea of tuxedos and haute couture. "Who let her in?" a tech CEO muttered to his wife. "Probably lost her way from the kitchen," the wife replied. Stifling a laugh, Audrey heard them all. She absorbed their judgment, filing it away. She stopped just at the edge of the VIP boundary, standing firmly in the center of their golden cage. Camilla spotted her first. The CEO's wife was scanning the crowd for cameras when her eyes locked onto Audrey. Camilla's perfect, rehearsed smile twitched. She leaned over and whispered something into Sterling's ear. Sterling's brow furrowed. He stepped off the stage, handing his champagne glass to an assistant, and walked directly toward Audrey. His steps were heavy, meant to intimidate. "Miss," Sterling called out, his tone dripping with fake politeness. "Are you lost?" Audrey looked at him, her expression entirely neutral. "I am exactly where I need to be." Sterling chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. He looked back at his friends in the VIP section, rolling his eyes. "I'm sure you are. But the staff break room is down the hall. We have dignitaries here tonight. We can't have the floor cluttered." "I don't work for your hotel," Audrey replied smoothly. Camilla arrived, her heels clicking aggressively against the stone floor. She looked Audrey up and down, her lip curling in disgust at Audrey's unbranded shoes and lack of makeup. "Sweetie," Camilla sighed, adopting a tone usually reserved for unruly children. "If you wanted extra hours tonight, you should have signed up with the catering manager. Pretending to be a guest isn't the move. It's actually just embarrassing." Audrey remained silent. Her stillness unsettled them. She didn't fidget, she didn't apologize, and she didn't shrink under their gaze. She had spent her 20s being overlooked and underestimated. She wasn't that girl anymore. Camilla's irritation spiked. She snatched a full glass of red wine from a passing waiter's tray and shoved it toward Audrey's chest. "Here, take this to table 4. They've been waiting. Do your job, or I'll have security drag you out." Audrey didn't raise her hands to take the glass. She just stared at Camilla, her eyes cold and piercing. "I suggest you put that down." The defiance shocked Camilla. She gasped, insulted by the utter lack of submission. Sterling's face darkened. He snatched the glass from his wife's hand. "Allow me," he barked, his voice rising, drawing the attention of the entire room. "We have one rule at Aetheris," Sterling announced loudly, playing to the crowd that was now turning to watch. "We don't tolerate dead weight, and we certainly don't tolerate insubordination from the hired help." He raised the glass high, one less confused worker ruining the vibe. With a flick of his wrist, Sterling tipped the glass forward. The dark red wine cascaded down, hitting Audrey squarely on the chest. It splashed against her collarbone and ran down the front of her black dress in thick, ugly lines. The room gasped as one. For a moment, time froze. A few guests covered their mouths, but the shock quickly morphed into cruel amusement. A woman in the front row let out a sharp laugh. Phones shot into the air, red recording lights blinking like a swarm of mechanical fireflies. Did he actually just do that? A young investor whispered excitedly. Camilla smirked, crossing her arms. Maybe now she knows where she stands. Get out. Audrey stood perfectly still. The wine dripped from her chin onto her dress. She felt the cold liquid seeping through to her skin. She didn't scream. She didn't launch into a furious tirade about who she was. People who held real power never needed to shout. She lifted a hand, took out her handkerchief, and wiped her jaw. She looked at Sterling, committing the arrogance in his eyes to memory. Then she looked at Camilla, whose triumphant smile was cemented on her face. Without a word, Audrey turned around. The silence she left in her wake was heavier than the music. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea, pulling their expensive gowns away so she wouldn't brush against them. Walks out like she owns the place, a waiter muttered. Nobody believed it. Not yet. Audrey pushed through the heavy oak doors, stepping out of the glaring lights and into the quiet, cool hallway of the hotel lobby. The hallway was a stark contrast to the circus inside. It was silent, lined with plush carpets and soft, ambient lighting. Audrey walked with the same steady, unhurried pace she had maintained all night. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. The screen illuminated her face, highlighting the red stains on her collar. She pressed a single contact name, Marcus, legal. It rang barely half a second before a crisp voice answered. Ready for your signal, Vance? Audrey's voice was low, carrying no anger, only absolute, chilling authority. Pull the offer, freeze the escrow accounts, terminate the contract immediately. There was a brief pause on the line. Understood. The $1 billion is withdrawing now. Shall I notify the board? Notify everyone. Blast it to the media. Release the SEC filings. I want Ethirus Holdings locked out of our systems before I reach my car. Done, Marcus replied. The call ended. No dramatic goodbyes, just raw efficiency. As Audrey walked past the valet stand, a couple waiting for their car stared at her. Noticing the drenched dress, the man squinted, recognizing her face from a financial magazine he couldn't quite place. Is that? He murmured to his wife. Audrey didn't look back. The night air was freezing, biting at her wet clothes, but she felt nothing but absolute clarity. The valet rushed forward, keys in hand, looking confused by her appearance. Walking is fine, she told him quietly, waving him off. She stepped onto the damp pavement, the distant sounds of city traffic washing over her. She slipped her phone back into her pocket. The trap had been sprung. Behind her, the heavy glass doors of the hotel stood glowing in the night. Inside, the countdown had reached 0. Inside the grand ballroom, the string quartet had resumed playing, and the champagne was flowing again. Sterling was laughing loudly at a joke told by a state senator. Camilla was posing for a photographer, making sure her best angle was captured. Then, the music abruptly cut out. It wasn't a slow fade. The massive speakers let out a harsh electronic pop, plunging the room into an uncomfortable, heavy silence. The massive digital screens behind the stage, which had been proudly rotating the Ethirus logo, suddenly glitched. The golden lights flickered. A stark, bright red screen replaced the logos. Bold white text appeared across every monitor in the room. Notice acquisition terminated. Funding withdrawn. A collective murmur rippled through the 300 guests. Glasses were lowered. Sterling frowned, stepping toward the stage. What is this? Get the AV team on this immediately. Someone fix that screen. But it wasn't an AV error. Across the room, the sharp chimes of cell phone notifications began going off. First one, then a dozen, then 100. It sounded like a digital avalanche. A senior board member stared at his phone, his face draining of blood. Sterling, he called out, his voice shaking. Sterling, look at your phone. Sterling yanked his phone from his tuxedo pocket. His inbox was flooded. Urgent. Escrow frozen. Urgent, investor pulled out. urgent stock plummeting in aftermarket. What is happening? Camilla demanded Shaw, stepping up beside him, her triumphant smile finally collapsing. The deal is dead, the board member choked out, staring at his screen. The holding company just terminated the contract. With cause. They triggered the penalty clause. Panic exploded. Investors rushed toward the exits, shouting into their phones, desperately trying to salvage their portfolios. The room dissolved into chaos. Sterling grabbed the host by the collar. Who gave the order? Get the holding company on the phone right now. I am the CEO. You don't have a company anymore. Sterling, someone shouted from the crowd. Look at the news. A young tech journalist standing near the stage tapped his microphone, amplifying his voice over the panic. Wait, everyone. Look at this video. He held his tablet high. It was connected to the local network, and the video cast directly onto the glitching main screens. It was the footage from 10 minutes ago. Sterling tipping the wine glass, the red liquid splashing across the quiet woman's chest. Camilla smirking in the background, the caption underneath. Already viral on Twitter. Read, Ithera CEO humiliates staff, or so he thought. Why are we watching this? Sterling roared, his face purple with rage. Shut it off. The senior board member walked slowly towards Sterling. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. He pointed a trembling finger at the frozen image of the woman on the screen. Do you have any idea who that is? Sterling, the board member whispered, though the microphone picked it up, broadcasting the horror to the entire room. She's a nobody, a waitress who snuck into VIP. Camilla shrieked defensively. That woman, the board member said, his voice cracking, is Audrey Vance, founder and sole owner of Vance Holdings. She is the mystery investor. She held the billion-dollar contract. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a bomb detonating inside a vacuum. Sterling's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His arrogant posture crumbled instantly. He looked at the screen, at the stained dress, at the calm, merciless eyes of the woman he had just publicly humiliated. We poured wine on the investor, Camilla whispered, her hands shaking violently. She stumbled backward, catching herself on a cocktail table. Guests were already bolting. The media members were typing frantically, shouting into their cameras. Etheris's reputation, its stock, its future, all of it shattered completely on the marble floor of the Grand Solstice Hotel. The sun rose on a massacre. By 7 a.m., Etheris Holdings stock had lost 80% of its value. Partners severed ties via text message. Board members resigned through public tweets to save their own reputations. The wine-pouring clip had been viewed 30 million times, becoming a permanent monument to corporate arrogance. Sterling and Camilla Hayes hadn't slept. They sat in the back of their luxury SUV, staring blankly at the passing streets. Sterling's hair was a mess, his tuxedo wrinkled. Camilla's makeup was heavily smudged, her eyes red and swollen. We just have to explain, Sterling muttered frantically, bouncing his leg. It was a misunderstanding. We didn't know it was her. If we just apologize, she can reverse the termination. Camilla nodded numbly, clinging to a desperate delusion. The car pulled up to the Vance Holdings headquarters, a towering structure of black glass and steel. There was no flashy logo, just absolute, imposing strength. They were escorted up to the top floor by a silent, unsmiling security team. When the double doors to the corner office opened, they found Audrey standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the city. She wore a pristine white suit, her hair still tied back simply. She looked completely untouched by the storm she had created. Miss Vance, Sterling started, his voice cracking as he rushed forward. Please, we beg you to listen. Audrey turned slowly. She did not offer them a seat. We made a terrible mistake, Camilla cried, genuine tears finally falling. We didn't know who you were. We thought you were someone else. If we had known you were the investor, we never would have treated you that way. Audrey tilted her head, her eyes narrowing just a fraction. And that is exactly why you are here. Begging, Sterling swallowed hard, dropping his gaze to the floor. We lost everything. Ms. Vance, the company is ruined. Our reputations are gone. Please, give us a chance to make it right. Reinstate the deal. Audrey walked toward her desk, leaning against the edge. She looked at them, not with anger, but with cold, clinical certainty. She wasn't a victim seeking vengeance. She was a predator pruning the weak from her ecosystem. You didn't lose everything last night, Audrey said, her voice smooth and fatal. You lost it the second you decided a person's worth was dictated by the label on their clothes. We are so sorry, Camilla sobbed. You aren't sorry, Audrey corrected quietly. You are just terrified of the consequences. You built a world where you believed disrespect had no cost. You thought you could crush anyone beneath you because of your wealth. Now, you are simply seeing the bill. Sterling stepped forward, desperate. Is there any numbers, any condition we will step down? We will give you controlling shares. The deal is gone, Audrey stated, her tone finalized. The trust is non-existent, and my door is permanently closed. She pressed a button on her desk. The heavy doors behind the couple opened. 2 security guards stepped in. Walk carefully, Audrey warned them, her eyes locking onto Sterling's broken face. The world is much smaller than you think. They left with nothing. No dignity, no empire, no future. Audrey Vance watched the doors close, the silence in her office heavy and peaceful. She sat at her desk, opened a new file, and went back to work. She had established her boundaries, and she would never let anyone use her or step on her again. Never judge a person's value by the clothes they wear. Sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one who holds the power to change everyone's fate.